Hello, all, and welcome back to a new episode of Movies and Us, a weekly gathering place filled with conversations about movies, stories, and connection. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
And today we are continuing our journey covering a lot of the Seattle Film Festival. We've been watching two movies up until this point. This will be our third one, and our final one, we're talking about Slanted today. Sarah, do you want to kick us off with an IMDb summary for Slanted?
Sure. An insecure Chinese-American teenager undergoes experimental surgery to appear white, hoping to secure the prom queen title and peer acceptance.
Now, ain't that a premise? You know, that got me hooked.
Honestly, though. Yeah, I think both of us were like, we need to watch this.
Oh, yeah. What a fascinating premise, and really taking a dynamic that exists and pushing it very far. So we have lots to talk about. Let's start off with our Movies and Us one-sentence summaries for Slanted. Sarah, what is yours?
Mine is, you can go too far to become prom queen.
Yes, you can go too far, indeed. And yeah, she goes very far.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that more. My one-sentence summary is dumplings over dimples.
Nice. Yes. I love
that. Mm-hmm. Always the better choice, let's be real. Okay, well, let's start off with our high-level thoughts, our initial reviews of Slanted, and our last two Seattle Film Festival SIFF review episodes. I think it's been less than 24 hours since we shared our thoughts about those, so that was fresh, hot off the press. But our thoughts about Slanted are hottest off the press. It's been 2 hours in total since we walked out of the theater, so this is fresh in our minds. I'm sure there will be more that we'll process, but high-level thoughts about Slanted. Sarah, what did you think?
Yeah, I had a great time with this film. I think that it really hits the nail on the head and does it in a way that I think is really effective and powerful. I was really impressed by the fact that you understood why our protagonist was doing this. Like her choices, while extreme, you understood the motivation. You understood what she was feeling, and I think that has to do obviously with the writing and the acting, but I think that the film is so intentional to immerse us in Joan's world. And so we see all of the like media inputs that she's constantly being exposed to and how that just like wears on her over time. So I love how much this film is just filled with empathy for this character. And there's like, it's obviously a very like tragic story that we embark on, but there's also just so much care that was used all throughout this. And it's funny, it's you know, splashy. There's so much going on in this. Like it is a fun watch, but there's also just so much going on beneath the surface too. And I think that has a lot to do with how fully formed these characters are and how much like love and care this film has for especially this central family and Joan's family that we're following. So yeah, I had a great time with this. I would highly recommend this, honestly, like especially if you are a white person and you have the ability to go see Slanted, go watch this. I think especially if you are a white woman, go watch this. I think that it's so valuable, and there's a lot of jokes at white people's expenses, and honestly, they're on point, all of them. So I think it's so worth it, especially as a white woman, going and watching this and seeing how other people show up in the world and some of these, you know, like some of the societal pressures that others feel that we are somewhat insulated by as white women. So I think it's just, if you have an opportunity to go see Slanted, please go see it. Obviously, like we want to support female filmmakers, you know, we would just want to support great films, but I think it's helpful to be exposed to something that I wasn't as aware of as maybe I could have been. So I think that there's some eye-opening bits in this. I think it deepens some of what I already knew. So I think it's an important movie to go see, in addition to it just being an awesome film. So, anyway, that's
Yeah.
my whole soapbox. Go see Slanted if it is playing near you.
Love it, love it. Sounds like this movie really worked for you. Yeah, I really appreciate this film quite a lot. You can tell that this is a story that is so deeply personal for the director and the creators. It's really notable. I'll just give a shout out that so many of the production team for this film is also Asian. And just when we were in the theater watching a lot of the ending credits, I was just so encouraged to see like there's so many roles that go into making a film, and so many of them for Slanted are people that seem to be of Asian descent based on last names. So that was really encouraging to see. And I think that the fusion and integration that this film is showcasing of beauty standards and whiteness and the ways that we try to assimilate and the costs that it comes at is really quite notable. So it personally hit home for me because there's so many dynamics around being an Asian female growing up in a white community and white schools with white friends and some of the ways that you feel a lot of that tension that Joan feels. I think this film captures a lot of that really well. I will say that I think the first half of the film is the strongest because that is where a lot of the focus is, and there's some things in the second half of the film that I wish the film maybe pushed a little bit more, and there's some conversations and dynamics that I think will be fascinating for us to talk about as well. So, yeah, on the whole, I really appreciate this film, and I hope that a lot of people get to see it.
And I think another cool thing that happened at our screening is that the director stopped by for a little Q&A after. And
It
so
was
that
so
was
cool.
just so cool to not only hear like the audience asked some really good questions,
Yeah.
and then it was just so cool to hear her talk about elements of the film and kind of the meanings behind them as well. So that was just an awesome experience to hear directly from her talking about her own film.
Mhm, mhm. And I think specifically when she was able to share about how so much of what she's written into the film, she's experienced as a Chinese person growing up in Australia, I thought that was, like, so exciting to see because we feel that in the film. We can read about them through interviews and, articles that are written about this film or conversations with the director, but to hear like right after the film just finished and hearing her share that, I think was like such a special experience. So, we got lucky. We got really lucky. We've been talking about how it'd be so cool to see a Q and A with some of the folks from the film for some of our SIF screenings, and we got one for our last one. So, that was really cool.
It was the perfect little, like, cherry on top of this SIFF experience, which was
Yeah.
just so much fun.
Yes, agreed. Okay, so if you haven't seen Slanted yet, we're going to give a spoiler alert here. We hope that this film gets picked up with a wider distribution plan in place. It sounds like it's definitely making its rounds in the festival circuit and will be potentially showing at film festivals near you. I think the team had shared that there's at least one or maybe a few more in the US for film festivals that this film will be shown in. So we hope you get a chance to see Slanted, and we're going to now dive fully in. All right. What are some things that really stood out to you? Where shall we begin?
Gosh, there's just so much to this film. I think a good place to start maybe is,
Yeah.
like, the role of social media in
Yeah.
all of this. That was so in your face, like, right from the start, and you see, you know, the toxicity that can come from that, and just it's so funny because like, I mean, social media was a thing towards, like, the end of my high school years, so, like,
Yeah.
I can't imagine, being a teenager today and having all of the everything that we have now. I feel
Mm.
ancient. And so I love how that opening especially really immersed us in what Joan is consuming. And you see
Mm.
her like she's watching like a makeup tutorial and she's doing her makeup while watching it. And then she gets a notification about, one of her the popular girl at school and it's just like inundated with all of these really unhealthy beauty standards, and I just appreciate how this film really highlights that it's not all social media, but it social media
Mm.
is a part of this larger thing, and the way that unhealthy beauty standards are all over the place, but especially on social media, it's really prevalent.
Yes, yes. I loved the opening, like, 7 minutes to 10 minutes of this film because we there's so much that's established in the dynamics that exist here. The makeup video one is one that particularly resonated with me because so many of the beauty tutorials and makeup products even that are we have accessible to us here in the United States are made and optimized for people that are from some of these demographics that, like, are fit for things like eyelash curlers that are shaped for eyes that are not made for Asian eyes. And so that that dynamic of her watching that video and trying the same tactics on her own eyes, that those things actually it's a completely different ball game with Asian eyes and how the makeup strategy and how you approach doing your shadows because our shapes are so different, our indentations are so different in our face. And so that's a dynamic that I like personally felt growing up, like trying the eyeliners and the eyeshadow tactics, but they're actually they don't fit Asian eyes and Asian features. And even details down to like Asian makeup brands often make formulas and shapes and colors that look better on Asian skin with Asian features. And so that challenge that she's dealing with, where she's maybe putting on a thicker eyeliner with a lot of heavy shadow and her mom's commenting on it, that dynamic is so real. So they nailed that because when she was watching the makeup tutorial at the beginning, we don't see what she's watching. And so I had this feeling, I was like, is it going to be a white person doing this, giving this makeup tutorial? And it totally was. And I just felt so seen in that moment. So that was really cool. And I think is the type of like small detail that because Amy Wang grew up and understands so much of the details of these dynamics, she could weave that specific detail in and just the disconnect between tips and tricks that you see that are recommended to you in magazines or I guess now in YouTube videos, those magazines at the time, and then what actually works and fits your features. So different.
Yeah, that's so interesting because, like, when her mom says that, like, "Oh, you wear such heavy makeup," I was like, "Oh, that's just a thing that, like, moms say,"
Yeah.
you know? But that I love that there's an additional meaning there of, like, it's not just that you're wearing a lot of makeup, but, like, you're wearing it wrong. Like,
Yeah.
there's another way to do this that will enhance your beauty rather than, attempt to conform you to a standard that is not made for you. That's so
Mhm.
interesting.
Mhm. And even the mom's comment around, "Your makeup is so heavy," that is insinuating and really showcases how the East and the West have very different styles of makeup. The Eastern Asian makeup tends to be a little bit lighter, more youthful, more pinky, brighter tones, and then in the West, they often accentuate, like, really bolder looks versus the softer looks. And so there's a lot of makeup tutorials right now, even of Asian females that will do like what a Korean style of makeup will look like versus an American style makeup will look like. And you can see how different those standards are. So that even shows like a maybe generational divide or a cultural divide between mom who grew up in China, it seems to be, and more Eastern standards of beauty that's a lot more light and softer in the features. And then obviously Joan's growing up in America and she's consuming American media where it's a lot more of those bigger, bolder, heavier looks that are must have been big at the time of whatever time period this is. And so I just thought that was really cool too to showcase so much nuance from that like one little comment that the mom makes.
Well, and you even see, like, Joan's wall is just plastered with white women's faces, and you see that in all of those photos. It's much heavier, like, eyeliner and eye makeup and all of
Yeah.
that, which is obviously, like, very much an American style. So that's even interesting that what she has chosen to curate on her wall is so different than, number 1, what might look good with her features,
Features.
but number
Mhm.
2 is just so different than anything that her mom would have seen. That's really interesting.
Mhm. Mhm. I thought that the production design and set design of her room was so well done. That was one of my favorite parts of the film, especially that wall right next to her bed. Her bed's pushed up against a wall, and it's covered with faces, which is it's, like, somewhat accurate, you know what I mean? Like, teenage girls have tons of posters hanging. I did, just, like, plastered everywhere, but those faces were cut out, like, around the face, so they kind of look a little bit more like heads instead of faces, like, instead of the, like, square or rectangular posters with, a celebrity on there, there's just a wall of heads that is kind of terrifying and very eerie, but also showcases what you just mentioned, which is that all of the images around her are of white women, and so it showcases what she idolizes, but then also, of course, she's gonna wanna look like them. Everything that she sees around her in her room, in her media, and then also at her school, everybody in her community. There's, like, very few people of color that are shown in this school. So, what is a young girl supposed to think, of what she's supposed to look like? And so, I think that was a really cool aspect about her room kind of being a reflection of maybe her inner world or her inner state or what her desires were. And as a kid growing up, your room is totally that way, like the things you hang up on your wall or your decor is such a mode of expression and of desires, of dreams that I think is captured really well as a way to showcase this character's inner state, inner world.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's this reinforcement of the othering that she feels in her real
Yeah.
life, and I think that that's also really interesting, especially when it's layered with that she doesn't talk to her parents about it at
Mm.
all, like, until
Yeah.
after she's undergone the surgery, and that's when they're able to finally have this conversation where they're able to all share about the ways that they are navigating this experience of
Mm.
being American, being Chinese American, and I found that to be really, really striking that, obviously at school she feels that otheredness, but she also brings that home with her, and that
Mm.
shame that she feels that just kind of like cloaks her, and she can't even express what she's feeling even with her family. And so then that just kind of like reinforces that negative headspace that she's in, which then
Mm.
I don't know. Then I think it makes it easier to understand why she would take such a drastic step. We as the audience are watching this going, "No, don't do it, don't do it." But if you are that girl who is just that, being othered is kind of the lens through which she sees the world. And all of
Mm.
those things help you feel what she's feeling. And so that seems like a logical step at the time.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And it's really notable that the inciting incident that pushes that character to the point of no return where she does the full surgery, not just the hair transplant, but the full surgery, is when she's made fun of and bullied at school. And the shame that she feels is so unbearable that the costs of the surgery seem irrelevant when she can gain so much. And I think it was so beautiful and so powerful that Amy Wang, after the film and during the Q&A, talked about and specifically called that the experience of shame and how that can be so overwhelming as a young person where you don't know how to even articulate, you don't even understand what it is, but you just know how it feels and you want to change it and you want something different. And I think that was really notable in how that plays out for her choice to make this big change to her appearance, but I really loved that the director also called it that because we sometimes don't have words for that feeling, but we all know what it feels like to be othered, to be overlooked, to be made fun of for just who you are, and that is powerful, and it can push you to do things that maybe you would never expect yourself to do.
Yeah, and I think the film does such a good job of, like, transporting you back to high school too, you
Oh,
know? Like, man, just what a rough time, and we see all of that there,
yeah.
you know? We see her go through all of those difficult high school things, so the way that the film immerses you in not only just, like, her headspace, but
Mm.
how she's processing through the really hard time of being in high school, I thought was really effective.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that's so good. One other detail related to this that I think is really notable in this opening section is that we actually start the film with Joan as a young kid. I think she's like, what, 6 or 7? Really young,
Yeah, she's
tiny,
little.
tiny. Yeah, and she sees the scene where prom is happening in the high school that her dad works at, and she hears the man working at the school introducing prom queen, and I think he says the prom queen is the embodiment of American values, and I thought that was so notable and so interesting is that, like, popularity and celebrity and all of that is not just what we revere, but there's, like, more to it that seems to be insinuated based on who we choose to idolize, and I liked that we get to see that all of this conditioning that she's experiencing and taking in has happened from, like, such a young age, and so by the time we get to the next cut and she's 16 or 17, we understand that this has actually been years of this seeping in, infiltrating in. We don't just start the film with her in high school. We actually start all the way back from when her mind was even more just fragile and susceptible to all of these ideas and the dynamics in her environment. So I really appreciate that the film starts her so young and seeing this dynamic and understanding and coding it. Maybe not even I mean, not even consciously, has no idea what's happening, just absorbing it, and that is reality. That is what we revere, that is what's important in society, so, okay, that's shaping my desires, whether I realize it or not. I think that was so important, is starting the movie from age 6, Joan.
And I think that's such an important point because when we look at our media, you know, we are
Mm.
taught that if you are beautiful, then you are good. And we
Yeah.
see that
Oh, yeah.
in film, in TV. I mean, think about like Disney
Disney.
movies. It's the princesses, they're gorgeous. And they are good. And then you look at, you know, the old hag, the evil witch, you know, all of those things. They're ugly, they're scary, they're bad. And
Yeah.
so we're just constantly bringing in these unhealthy beauty standard messages wh- whether we mean to or not. They're just everywhere
Mm,
that we equate beauty, quote unquote beauty, because it's always one standard of beauty that is unrealistic, with goodness. And then
mhm.
that inevitable, like if you take that to its most extreme conclusion, you end up with something like what Joan goes through. And
Mhm.
I love that this film starts with her as a kid because I mean, having grown up in America, we know the stuff that we consumed as kids that
Yeah.
can maybe lead us on this path of shame and body image
Mm.
issues and all of those things that contribute to her making this decision.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. There's there's so much media that's constantly being seeped into our minds, and honestly, the pace of that is growing significantly too, so I love that detail that Ethnos identifies her initially because she is the top 0.0001% of users of the filter that makes her look white. And so the expression or evidence of her desire is being able to be like explored, satisfied, understood through social media, through filters and beauty filters and all of that kind of stuff. So I just thought that was really smart, like a really smart way to usher in like how would this creepy science technology weird company just chaotic as heck. How would they even find her? And it's through technology. It's through social media that they've identified this user seems to be using this a lot. It's indicative of a desire that is being expressed outwardly in this action. So I thought that was Just really some really smart screenwriting right there. It's good.
So one thought that I had about
Yeah.
ethnos and
Oh,
their messages and even the way that they talked too, and maybe the film just didn't like show us these bits,
yeah.
but they called her by her name, her full name when she walks in, but
Okay.
we don't see her, like, give her name to anybody,
True.
and then when he mentions the Black roots, and there may have been a scene that we didn't see where she expresses that, but of course, I put on my little tinfoil hat, and I wondered, like, what data Ethnos is also collecting about its users.
Ah.
And so it just made this company, I mean, obviously what they're doing is creepy and evil and awful and all of those things, but then the idea that maybe they're also like harnessing people's data and using it for shady things just like made them even more evil of a company in my mind. So yeah,
Mm.
that was like those were little details that I was picking up on and going, "Ugh, this is even more shady than maybe meets the eye."
Yeah. Well, it's along that same vein, the Black Roots comment that's made by Olivia to her is immediately followed up, like, seconds later by the message from Ethnos that
Yep.
says, "Hey, you wanna get rid of your Black roots?
Right.
Come on by to our salon." So, it happened within an instant. So, it does seem to be insinuating, which I kind of assumed that they were listening. They're like they can hear everything through her phone somehow or whatnot, enough for them to know exactly when to send that message right as she's experiencing the feelings of shame and all of that emotion from having received that comment from Olivia just seconds before. Ooh, like preying on that feeling and that discomfort for her.
Mhm. Oh, it was
Yikes.
so creepy, like,
Yikes.
ooh, that gave me the heebie-jeebies while watching.
Mhm.
It's like, that is some sinister DMing that's going on right there.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so rough. What did you think about a lot of the ethnos, like, world building, for lack of a better word, of how they were portrayed? Because I mean, the concept of designing a creepy, ethnic transformation surgery company is kind of like an interesting imaginative task to do to, like, how do you portray it? What do their offices look like? Who works there? And I'm curious your thoughts about some of the choices that were made for Amy Wang's version of ethnos.
No, I thought it was so good. I thought it was so spot on. I especially loved the design of those offices because it's very white and very crisp, and then you have these like pops of foliage, which is totally like a rich white person thing to do. It's very
Yeah.
hilarious. And then those videos, my God, they were so hilarious. They're so good. And so like it's one of there were so many points I feel like in this movie where I'm like laughing at something, and these videos are a good example. Like I'm laughing at it and then I'm going, "Oh." Like once you think about it for a half second, you're like, "Man,
Yikes.
that is pointing out some real realities in our world and that
Uh,
deserves a yikes." And so I love the way that the film does that so well. It'll get you laughing, but at the same time, it's a gut punch. And
mhm,
the that combination I feel like is hard to pull off and it happens quite a few times, but all of those
mhm,
videos in Ethnos I thought were spot on and are really good indictments of a lot of things that we experience here in America that
mm,
honestly, white people, a lot of times, we're not aware of. So I
mm.
thought that that was really, really good and a humorous way to tell some pretty harsh truths.
Yeah, and to have the ability to do the piercing gut punch, while making you laugh along the way, it's kind of like winking, but also, "No, no, you should really think about this though, because it's actually really true, okay? Like, after you're done laughing, then let's let the cognitive capabilities kick in a little bit as we contemplate how that privilege is very real. I think like every single one of the videos is articulating subtle dynamic where they have privilege. Like the one that really stood out to me is this white woman saying, I realize that like I can get whatever I want as long as I choose to threaten people with it, and they can't do anything about it because I'm white, and she's talking about, like, threatening that the waiter was, like, putting her life in danger, and then she got a meal
Mhm.
out of it, like,
Yep.
the that is such a real dynamic, but it's done in an over the top way that is reflective of something that is maybe more subtle, but this film basically at its core is taking all of these dynamics that are subtle and maybe more nuanced and maybe more sinister, but not obvious in the dynamics at play in society, and just ratchets the volume up to 100 for us to really look at it and really examine it. So, yeah, so well done. I loved those bits.
Mhm. Yeah, they're so they're so good, they're so funny. And the whole film is filled with moments like that too, that
Yeah,
is shining a light on these very real dynamics that people of color face every day, and also pointing out, like, just the ridiculousness of, like, whiteness and white culture and all of that. So
yeah.
I loved that scene where she's in Olivia's house and everything is white, everything is beige, all their food is white, they're drinking milk, like, everything is just so funny, all their
The
shirts.
food.
Yes, it's all white.
The food.
It looked awful, and I was like, "You know what?
Oh,
Honestly, we deserve to be made fun of. White people food? Yes, we need to make fun of
no
that,
flavor.
right? Hey, man, I'm a terrible cook, I'm working on it, I'm learning how to season my food, thanks to my roommate who is a great cook. So, I get it. But I loved those all those little details of just poking fun at these
Yeah,
things that are the standard, obviously not white people food because bland,
yeah.
gross, but the rest of it, the decor was so funny, but you'll see
Sterile,
decor like that in, like, every, household
rich, white.
magazine. Yeah, it's
Yep.
just so funny.
One of the details that I really loved about that scene and kind of the world building of this movie in general with Olivia and her father at dinner with Joan, who's complete the transformation, is that we don't actually see necessarily the cost that Olivia and her father are needing to pay physically. It seems to be working just fine for them. Like, we obviously see that there's a lot of physical ramifications for Joan, but Olivia kind of promises that it gets better. So presumably, like, you can live your life fine with the ethnosurgery as a white person. And that's very different from the movie that this movie is being compared to with The Substance, where there's very clear deterioration of the things that they are doing to their bodies in that movie. This one, there's actually no perceived cost, but in that scene with Olivia and her father, the point of that scene is basically the cost is that you've literally lost your culture. That is the ultimate cost that you're paying is you have stripped yourself of your identity, of what ties you to your roots, of the connectedness with your community. They're estranged from their mother. Like, that is the cost. And it's so interesting that they're Cuban as well because they're having this meal, and Cuban food is incredible. It's so good. It's so flavorful. But Olivia and her father have chosen to just forego all of that to be white. And I think that's a really like interesting dynamic in this film is that the promise of being white and the success of the surgery seems to actually work fine. And so the real cost is actually you lost your dang culture. And that sucks for you if you've made that choice. You know what I mean? I thought that was really cool because it's easy to do maybe the other version, which is physically they're deteriorating and they have to keep this up and it's really exhausting. But Olivia's kind of like chilling and she says it gets better and there's no perceived physical cost or even emotional cost. They're fine, but they're unaware of how much they've actually lost. And I think that's the ultimate greatest cost that they're paying for this.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that that scene is also really beautifully set up by the conversation that Joan has with her dad when her dad says something to the effect of like, "I used to see your grandmother in your face."
Oh,
And, like, I don't know about you, but that, like, hit me like just a ton of bricks, holy
yeah.
cow. And so I think, like, that line was so profound and so powerful that I think blends perfectly with this
Mhm.
loss of culture as well.
Yeah.
And so it's loss of culture, it's loss of family, and even was it Olivia's dad that asks like, "Hey, did your family do this with you too?"
Yeah.
And so you're feeling that like, man, Joan is really alone in this. She has lost her culture.
Mhm.
Now she looks so different than her family, and but she also doesn't fit in with white culture either. And so
Yeah.
now she is truly alone and she is truly othered.
Mm.
And I think that conversation at Olivia's house really brings that point home
Mhm.
of just how alone Joan is now, and, that's obviously, like, her lowest point experiencing that, but, yeah,
Yeah.
I love that this film acknowledges, like, the importance of that history and the importance of culture and all the traditions, and you see Joan's mom constantly trying to, like, invite her into these really sweet family traditions, and Joan just wants none of it. So, the way that this film is so intentional to be like, "No, these things are beautiful. These things are gifts to be appreciated." And so we see the positive of the mom trying to include her, and then we see the
Mm.
negative of when Olivia and her dad have forsaken all of that.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's just, man, it's such a powerful way to frame that thought and that idea.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up that scene with her father in the parking lot between Joan's father and Joan. That scene got me so emotional. It was so good because I think it's so easy to tell young girls or women even to like love their features, to love their bodies. It's so easy to like just toss that message out there, but when literally everything in your environment is saying that beauty is something different. Like, how do you even do that? How do you love and accept those things in you? And I love that this film reframes that concept of figuring out how to love your features by saying, no, your features actually connect you to your ancestry. They connect you with your roots, they connect you with your loved ones. And I think that is a really fascinating new way to think about how we talk about accepting ourselves and accepting our beauty for what it is because it is so tied to our roots. And I think that the way that the film spends so much time showcasing on screen the parents' reaction to Joan's surgery is significant as well. Imagining being a parent watching your child that is of your genetics and all that kind of stuff just change so much of themselves must be challenging. And I think that emphasis on the parents' reactions was just like a interesting dynamic that I kind of didn't expect. I thought it would be a lot more focused with like Joan at school and some of those dynamics with her friends, but we spend so much screen time with the parents, their raw guttural reactions, all of that kind of stuff. And I've been thinking a lot about lately how much the like rise in the beauty industry of plastic surgery and even more less invasive things like Botox really can change your facial features quite significantly. And it's becoming more widespread, it's becoming more popular. And I was thinking about that a lot during this film because so many of the features that we've been given are from places that are really exciting and ancestries that are really abundant. But when we change them, what does that mean even? You know what I mean? I thought that was really neat because this film obviously takes like a very dramatic version of changing your literal entire face and your ethnicity, but we do that in smaller ways in the beauty industry today that's pushing those forward. So that was fascinating to see actually there's a lot of similarities in the things that the beauty industry is pressuring young girls or women to do.
Yeah, yeah, it's man, this film does such a good job of shining a light on all of those different toxic bits of our culture that so many women are just influenced by, and yeah, it does it so well because all of these things are connected to each other. And so obviously this film goes to an extreme, but like you said, there's little ways that we see this play out just every day that are much more normal. And I think it's such a good indictment on the unrealistic, unhealthy, toxic beauty standards that lead women to literally, like, go under the knife and change how they look, because whatever reasons. And, like, man, what an opportunity to, like, stop and think about all of these things and, like, man, we don't need to do this. We don't need to tell other women to that they have to uphold these unrealistic beauty standards. We can choose to appreciate, our features because they tell a story. We don't look like everybody else, and that's actually a good thing, which is such a beautiful way of reframing it. And the other thing that I kept thinking about while watching is how it's how representation is even more important, like we've seen a lot more, people of color in TV shows and movies, and we're seeing more stories told by people of color and sharing their perspectives. And I think this film does a really good job of highlighting that importance too, because I mean, this is a white person couldn't do this film.
Yeah.
Like, it
Yeah.
just, nor should they. And so I
Yeah.
love that this can shine a light on some of these things. And, obviously there's a lot of films about unhealthy beauty standards, the substance being one of them, but this
Mhm.
takes a completely different approach to it that I think is so necessary in giving voice and space for a very real thing that so many people experience.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. I think it's really fascinating and understandable that this movie is being compared to The Substance, and I have so many feelings about that because I feel like they're 2 different movies, and the
Mhm.
points that they're making are very different, and on the surface, they seem similar, like, it's the cost of what we will do to look the way that we wanna look, but The Substance tackles it from such a different angle, and there's a lot more that's focused around, like, how generations between women feel about each other, the process of aging, and all of that kind of stuff that's woven into that flavor, that strand of what beauty is defined as an aging woman in society. And I think Slanted also covers, of course, the topic of beauty, but it does it from the angle of race and whiteness and how people of color often feel the pressured or the propaganda to look whiter, and look more Western. And so I can see why they're being compared. There's some body horror aspects of it that are similar, but I feel like it's an unfair comparison. And because the substance goes so heavy on the body horror and all that kind of stuff that you feel that big dramatic explosive ending, I worry that people go into Slanted thinking that this is going to be similar to The Substance, and it's a totally different movie, and it's not looking to be a big gory body horror about an aging female in society. It's about a Asian woman figuring out how to understand herself and accept herself in the context of whiteness and white beauty standards. 2 different movies, 2 different themes. There is a lot of overlap, but I think that going in with the expectation that this is similar to The Substance perhaps sets the wrong expectations for Slanted that makes maybe the ending feel less climactic, less satisfying because we do get a different, more dramatic version of that in The Substance. You know what I mean? So I was thinking about that a lot leaving the theater too, because there was a question asked in the Q&A too around like The Substance and this being put in conversation with The Substance, which I think is interesting, but distinguishing them and showcasing how they're pulling on 2 very different strands is important too. So, I had a lot of feelings about it.
No, I totally agree, and I thought it was notable that before the film, the person introducing it, she even called out the substance and was like, "Hey, if you're looking for the
Yeah,
substance, this is not
that's
it."
good.
And she made it
That's good.
very clear that, like, yeah, there's a little bit of body horror, but, like, not
Less
what
than
you're
you
looking
think.
for if you're looking for the substance. And so
Yeah,
I
so
found
good.
that notable that she had to kind of level set expectations
Mm,
because so many people are comparing this to the substance. But you're right, like, it's such a different movie.
yeah.
It feels unfair to compare this to that. You're comparing apples and oranges. They're both
Mhm.
fruit, so they have some similarities, but, like, they're getting to
Mhm.
very different outcomes. So,
Yeah.
yeah, both quite good, but very different
Very
films.
different, very different. And I can see how that can work against Slanted with the wrong expectations. You know, for the people that love body horror and go into this thinking they're gonna get that, they're gonna be like, "Oh, but that's not that." I would argue, position this as a coming of age movie, you know?
Oh, yeah,
Like,
100%.
and there's some body horror sprinkles on it, you know? But for the most part, it's about growing up, fitting in, understanding yourself, coming back to your roots, and figuring out who you are in the context of your family, of your social dynamics. That's what this film is about. And yeah, there's some horror-y things, but I was actually even bracing for myself for this movie too, and I was pleased that it was fine. It was great.
Mhm. Yeah, you did alright.
I did alright. I did alright. I did hide behind the head of the person in front of me during a scene or 2, but
Hey, that's
I
not bad.
I appreciate when there's a full packed audience, especially in a movie like this. 1, because cinema is not dying, it is going to be thriving, and it's we're going to make it rise, but then also, heads are useful in a scary movie, you know?
Oh, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Mhm. Okay, other interesting things that I think this film does that were notable, surprising to me. One of them I wanted to mention is the scene where Joan's mother has a conversation with Joan while they're cuddling on the bed, where the mom expresses that she didn't realize how confusing it would be for Joan to be Chinese, but grow up in a predominantly white community, and I thought that was so interesting because they didn't have to include that scene in there, but it's a conversation that I think a lot of people that are children of immigrants might never have had with their parents, and a lot of immigrant parents might not even know and not be able to express it as eloquently and beautifully and clearly as Joan's mother does, so I thought that scene was interesting because I actually think that conversation doesn't happen with frequency at all, and so just thinking about the way that that could be healing in some small way for kids who feel like their parents maybe didn't really understand them because their parents were immigrants and maybe just don't realize what Joan's mother has realized in the film was an interesting just observation to include such a deliberate emotional beat, and I was surprised that that was coming out of Joan's mouth too, and my initial reaction was like, "I don't think that happens very often," and then my second thought was, "This might be really good for people to see," both, like, adults that maybe are immigrants to the States and have children that dealt with the dynamics that Joan does and understanding their child a little bit more, but then also for children of immigrants to feel like seen and even maybe not even by their actual parents, but even by this movie to be like, "It's confusing for you. We get it. We understand. It's hard and you did your best to navigate it all," you know? I think that was an interesting set of thoughts around that one scene that I was surprised by.
And I think that goes back to a point that you said earlier of, like, the writer and director, she has lived this, like, I mean, obviously not the story, but these
Mhm.
themes that are being explored in the story, she has lived them, as an Asian
Yeah.
woman in Australia and then in the United States, and she is able to bring those experiences to the screen and be able to write a scene like that that is so
Mhm.
powerful from a place that is really authentic and really, like, genuinely moving, and it's not just like, the story and the music swells, and so then you're feeling all of the feels, like, it
Yeah.
really feels as though that is coming from a genuine place and that identification of a source of pain that so many people
Mhm.
feel, and so being able to write from that place of pain to create something that is so beautiful and, potentially healing, I think is incredibly powerful.
Mhm. Mhm. And then the moment after where the father relates to her and comes to understand and kind
Oh,
of occupy that same space with her.
yes.
This Asian father is incredible, okay? Let's just acknowledge
Yes.
that first and
Absolutely.
foremost. Like, I'm like, wow, if we all grew up with Asian fathers like that, we'd all be a little bit better off. You know what I mean? He's so warm and deeply empathetic and sees her and creates space for her. Even when she's been had an attitude and been really rude to them, he still says that she looks beautiful on her prom night, even though she doesn't look like his daughter at all, like, all of those things were so incredible, but in that conversation, I love that he says, "Hey, I actually went through the same phase as you. I had my cowboy hat phase, okay? Like, I understand everything that you were trying to do and accomplish and hope for by doing this surgery. I was there too, but but, I found a different path. I've found a way to be American and still embrace everything that makes me who I am, and you will do that too." It was so beautiful and so encouraging. It's really great. That dad is a star.
He really is. Oh my gosh. So many of the, like, emotional gut punch moments, I feel like, come from the dad, and
Yeah.
just the way that I mean, obviously, like, the mom too, but the way that the father is
Yeah.
able to express his love for his daughter, and, I mean, she's clearly a daddy's girl too, so they have such
Mhm.
a bond, and it was just so beautiful to see that dynamic play out on the screen as
Yeah.
well, where he is able to just, express his emotions so clearly and, like, articulately
Oh,
too. I'm just like, "How did you do that?" Like, I can't express how I'm feeling that well either. So,
no.
yeah, there's such beautiful moments, and I think that's another, like, really important thing to bring to the screen because, like, how often do we see male characters being able
Mm.
to express themselves so well emotionally, you know?
Uh,
And then there's the whole, like, stereotypes around, like, immigrant parents and, like, all of
yeah.
that, and so I think that this does a really good job of showing a different way while also being, like, so honoring of who these people
Mm.
are because 'cause they're not, like, emotional all the time,
Yeah.
but it's these moments of tenderness and care show up all throughout, and so you've seen them caring for their
Mm.
daughter in different ways throughout the film, and then finally at the end, they express it verbally in a way that she's able to receive. So I thought that that was an important buildup too to those really impactful emotional moments. They don't just come out of nowhere, but they have been built up over the course of the film because we see how much they care for her, but she just couldn't see it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. There are some really beautiful scenes. I love even the moment at the end where Joan, post transformation, post prom night, I believe, comes home and just the scene is just the mother open arms hugging her daughter as her daughter's crying into her arms and the feeling of finally like coming home again and being loved and fully accepted and fully embraced again. Just that relief you feel, I thought was so incredible. My couple of nits, couple of things that I could have been better at this film because there's always maybe some for some films. There's a few scenes where Joan is talking with her parents where she's communicating so much so clearly. She's talking about, like, "I've always wanted to be white, I never fit in, da 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 da," and I think some of those scenes were a little bit, like, on the nose, like, the character's really explaining how she feels, and one, great screenwriting is kinda showing, not telling, and I think we, like, felt a lot of that already by that point, so I was like, "I don't know if she needs to say it, the character needs to say it," but then two, I'm also like, as a teenage kid, I don't know if you really can identify those things that clearly, you know what I mean? So, there are some of those moments in this movie where I wa I if I w I was like, "I wish this scene was maybe non-existent or just a little bit shorter because they keep going back and forth of expressing so clearly how they feel, and I'm like, "I think it happens a little bit differently and a little bit more chaotic, a little bit more messy than being able to articulate with such clarity." She's articulating really great things that are accurate and are deep sentiments of people that have experienced what she's experiencing, but I just there were so many of them. I think the volume of them could have been a little bit less. So that's my one thing that I think could have made this film even stronger than it is.
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah, that makes sense because the film does do a really good job of showing all of those things.
Yeah.
And so it's
Yeah.
just like, yeah, I was already tracking with you. You didn't
Mhm.
need to tell me what I already knew because you showed me.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, any other last little things, big things that we wanted to mention before we wrap?
I have 2 quick things. I loved in that dinner scene with Olivia and her dad where he keeps talking about equality, and he
Oh,
says equality, like,
so
so many
so many
times in that
times.
one conversation, and I thought that that was so smart the way that that scene was written, because it just shines a light on how ridiculous the whole idea of color blindness is, and this idea that, like, "Oh, I don't see color," and it's like, "No, that's so stupid." Like, we can
Mhm.
see these things and celebrate those
Yes,
cultures, you know? And
yes,
so I loved how ridiculous and over to the top that scene was to really highlight how just ridiculous
misguided.
this idea of, "Oh, I don't see color." Like, "What? That's so
Yeah,
stupid." No. We
yeah,
can and should see color and then celebrate these other cultures because they are beautiful and important and valuable. Like, it's so stupid. Anyway, so I loved that scene. I thought it was brilliant. And then just a silly thing is obviously this film is all about Joan wanting to be a prom queen. It's a whole thing. Was prom a big deal for you in high school?
we had prom, it was a big deal. We
Okay.
did not have prom queen or king or
Oh.
or we didn't even have, like, homecoming court either. We didn't have any of that. But it was a big deal, like, who you went with, what you wore, all that stuff was a big deal. Yeah. What about you?
Gotcha.
Was it a big deal?
Uh, I don't know. Maybe? I don't know. My friends tried to get me to go to prom, and I said, "No, I'm not going," and then I went and watched my friend Drag Race instead. So that was a much better use of my time, was
I love
watching
that.
cars drive very, very fast. So I don't know
That's
if prom was a big deal because I thought it was stupid, so I didn't go, which is very on brand for who I am as a person. So
yeah, I was gonna say that is the most you anecdote ever.
right.
My friends asked me to go to prom. I don't know if it was a big deal or not. I said no either way, and I
Yep.
went to see my friend Drag Race.
It was
Oh,
so much
man.
fun. I
So
had a blast,
good.
so I would highly recommend doing that over going to prom.
So good. I went to a different high school than I would have if I went to my local school in my school
Mhm.
district, which I think prom and homecoming was, like, a bigger deal there. So, I kinda dodged that bullet, which is great.
That is great.
Wonderful. Okay, what's your second thing?
That was my second thing.
Oh, the prom. Okay.
That was my silly question.
Love
'Cause
it.
I even as a teenager, I didn't understand prom. That sounded like an awful experience. So, I was just
Well,
like,
once
"Oh, okay."
again, honestly, it's the movies. The movies make prom to be this huge night
Right?
life that is and it's I get it. It's fun to, like, celebrate with your friends before graduation and you're all going off to college. Like, it's very fun, but they make it to be this big thing. I mean, the whole ending of Mean Girls is basically like I think it's homecoming in that one, maybe. Maybe it's prom. I don't remember, but the crown and the breaking of the crown and tossing it into the it's a whole thing. It's high school. My gosh, I don't miss it.
Mm-mm, not at all, and so, shout out to this film, though, for, like, resubmerging us into high school, into what
Yikes.
it's like to be a teenager,
Yikes.
constantly, like, being pulled in all of the directions, like, the
Ugh,
film is very effective at getting you back into that headspace, and I was very grateful to be done with the movie, not because it's a bad movie, but because I don't wanna be just submerged in that teenage
to be
experience
in high school
anymore.
anymore. Nope, nope. We
Thank
grown up
the
and
Lord.
we
We
know a little
survived.
bit more of who we are.
Yeah,
We love things about us. We're working on the things that we need to, it's
absolutely.
good. It's good.
Yep.
I have one maybe two little shout outs. One is the opening scene with the dad in the car. He sings this Chinese song that is a famous, super well-known Chinese song, and my mom would always sing that song to me. So I immediately, in, like, minute 2 of this movie, was just, like, feeling all of the feels, feeling so seen, and I think just brings to life what you said earlier, which is that representation is so important because I felt so seen by that little detail, and, like, I think every kid that grew up in maybe, like, a Chinese family or Chinese immigrant family if they don't know that song, they've definitely heard it before and probably know the melody, and that's really cool to see on the big screen, so that was very exciting. And then the other thing that I little moment that I really loved is little Joan in a school filled with white kids. That was my childhood growing up, and sh the school lunch moment where she brings her food that her mom made out of such care and love, but it's her ethnic food. It's Chinese food, which smells different from everybody else's, and immediately all of the little white girls turn their nose up at it. That is a dynamic that also so many immigrant families, children know that dynamic. And honestly, our food is better than all of the other ones, but it's not what's cool. It's not what's accepted. So you kind of feel like just the I could smell the food as she opened up her container, and that feeling is so real of being like, "Oh my god, everybody now notices that my lunch is different from theirs." And so that lunchtime dynamics and all of the way that food is also can be othering and is so clearly othering with the scent that wafts out from it. I thought that scene, that little vignette was so good too. I felt very seen by that and very resonant. So, it was very exciting to see.
Oh, I love that so much. Ugh, it's so good. The
Yeah.
other little detail that I loved in regards to food is when Joan eats at home, she uses, like, a fork and a spoon, and her parents are using chopsticks, and I thought that that
That's
was
good.
also such an intentional choice to show the ways that she is, maybe rejecting that part of her culture and that part of her heritage to try and fit in
Yeah.
even when she's at home. And I thought that that was very noticeable to me that she was
Mm,
using a fork and a spoon instead of the chopsticks that her parents were using.
yeah, that's a good detail. Wow, I didn't pick up on that one at all. That's good. Keen eye. Your keen eye.
I'm just trying to look out, trying to
Mhm.
find all the weird little details that I can.
Yep. Yep. All right. Well, this is our review and discussion of Slanted. We were so lucky to get to experience this with the Seattle International Film Festival. Again, a packed house, which was so exciting to see. A great crowd too, laughed at everything. We got some really good, like, loud reactors and commentary from folks to our right, which is really fun at the funny bits of them being like, "Oh, no way. Oh my gosh." I just love those people in a crowd that are so vocal, respectfully, of course, not in the moments that they shouldn't be, but just like it just kind of emerges out of them, and I love to see it. So, yeah, what a great cherry on top, the final film for our Seattle International Film Experience this year. We loved it. Thank you for
Yeah.
listening to this week's episode of Movies and Us. Our name sums it up. We're all about movies and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories, so everyone is welcome here, and we're so glad you spent time with us today. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune to your favorite shows. Drop us a rating or review letting us know if Slanted is coming near you, if maybe it's already come to a festival near you. I believe this premiered or was shown definitely at South by Southwest, so I'm curious if anyone was there and got to see this. Tell us your thoughts. You can connect with us on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at Movies and Us Pod, or email us at moviesanduspod@gmail.com. Check out our website, andusmedia.co, for the latest on Movies Us and our other podcast, TVN Us. Sarah, we are at a milestone point here. This is our last episode of the 300s.
Ooh.
Yes, we're
Wow.
on 399, which means
Holy
what's
cow.
next week's episode?
Our 400th episode.
Yes! Very
That's
exciting.
insane.
Kind
400.
of wild. We have not fully processed this information
No.
yet, but
Nope.
it is a fact and it's happening. So
Get ready. It's
here we
coming.
are. Yeah. Very exciting. We'll have a special episode next week for our 400th episode. We're going to be reflecting on this journey, this grand adventure for the past 400 pieces of content that we've created for this show. And we have a special movie review that is fitting for the theme. And we'll leave it at that.
Mhm.
There's some intrigue.
Yeah, we do.
All right.
We do love a good theme. So
We do.
we chose very well for our 400th.
You chose very well. It's just a great pick and will be maybe a little unexpected in the type of film that it is from our
Wow,
usual
that is a-
gamut.
That is a great teaser. Oh my gosh.
It's
Come
very
back
good.
next week. Watch or listen to our 400th episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're not going to want to miss it. It's so much fun.
It was a lot of fun and just really great to like stop, smell the roses, bask in the milestone. I think it's important too for us to just like feel the feels of this exciting milestone moment. It's crazy. All right. Well, that was our teaser for next week. We hope you have an amazing week, and we hope you'll be back next week, and we'll see y'all very soon.